Alright, so the AEMEV VCUs have some drag race related functions for electric drag vehicles. And most of these things are going to need a TransBrake switch that the driver can press. And we assume that for the most part these are like an actual TransBrake and a transmission brake, or some sort of a line lock, basically something that stops the car from moving when this switch is pressed. And then when the driver releases this is when they want to launch at the start line. And on a VCU300 you want to use pin K17, and that's an input with a pull down, so it's expecting to send voltage into the ECU when the switch is active. You could send voltage into the ECU when the switch is not active also, but if you just connect ground or disconnect ground, the switch won't register that. So the first thing that most people would use is this launch mode, and I've got it kind of parenthesized staging torque. What that does is, if the car is at the start light, right, if you're in the staging lanes, you're ready to go, you may want to hold your TransBrake and hold the pedal all the way to the floor without getting max power out of the motor. Right, if you use max power, you might overpower the brakes, or just waste energy, or for whatever reason you may not want to do that. But you may want to hold the pedal all the way to the floor so the vehicle is consistent each launch, and you're not having to find exactly 30% pedal or exactly 20% pedal or whatever happens to work well. So that's where you would use this launch mode staging torque. And you've got some options here. Launch mode allowed, that's got to be on for it to do this mode. Launch mode preload enable needs to be enabled for it to use this torque override table. When it's in launch mode, right, launch mode needs these things to be enabled. You also need the drive wheel and the ground wheel speed to be low, so in here below 2 miles an hour for both. You could set this to 3 or 4 if you thought that was important, but our defaults are 2 miles an hour each. Also, accelerator pedal needs to be above this minimum value, so at least 40%. And this is an option, TransBrake required. We assume that you're going to use a TransBrake. You could maybe make it work without a button, but for the most part, it's best to set this to true and use an actual switch or button that the driver is pressing and releasing when they want to go. So here I've got a few things happening here. Our accel pedal is 0, right? So the driver is not trying to move the car yet. I'm going to go down here and I have some like fail-safe demo options because this isn't a real car connected. So I'm going to tell it that the TransBrake is on, right? We see right now the TransBrake switch is set to off. If I change the polarity of the switch, it means that low voltage is on as opposed to high voltage is on. So right now the TransBrake switch is going to turn on. This high time thing counts up, but we won't worry about that yet. So the switch is on, but launch mode is not active yet, and that's because our accel pedal is not high enough. Right? So the driver would need to hold the brake and then press the pedal. And I have some fail-safe numbers here because I don't have a real pedal. I'm going to set it to 55, and there's 2 signals that it needs to be 55. So now my pedal is at 55%. My launch mode active is true, and what that means is that the original torque request is now being overridden by this table value, and this is a direct Newton meters of torque number you can set. So it's interpolating between cells and saying that it's 150. I could change this to I don't know, 300 if I wanted to, and then it should. Oh, I'm limited. I have another limit somewhere. Where's my limits? Maybe this table won't go above 150. Anyway, if I change this number down lower, I believe I can get it lower. Yeah, so this may be maxed out and limited to 150 somewhere Newton meters for this preload, because it's not intended to move the vehicle, it's intended to just load the suspension up against the brake so it's ready to launch without having to load up the suspension. So you could put lower numbers if you need to, higher numbers. You could have the numbers changed based on an accelerator pedal. So I guess if I set this up here to 150, this down here is at 0. I guess 40 is the lowest it's going to do. And then I can use a right click and do a interpolate. So now it interpolates 20, 40, 60, whatever. So now if my pedal changed, right, if I went up to 80, it would go up higher in the table, and if I went down to 40, it would go lower in the table. So that's how the driver could maybe modulate how much of that preload is happening. But for the most part, what the driver is probably going to do is they're going to set this to just 99% pedal, and it's going to go to the far right of this table, and it's going to use whatever number is there. So we could put 122 Newton meters, or 77 Newton meters, whatever. It's going to use that until they release the TransBrake button, which means, right, they're releasing the button because they want the car to launch and move. Now when they release this button, you see this launch ramp time number changing. What it does is it can also run a timer. Now you don't have to use this, but it's there for you if you do want it. So if you have a car that's traction limited at the launch, you can use this table down here. The VCU can run a timer after you release the button. We call it the launch ramp timer. So this launch ramp time number counts up because we released the TransBrake button. And when it counts up, it's a limit that multiplies the original pedal torque calculated numbers. And I set this to pretty low numbers, and it ran through the table pretty quickly. So let's go back to the TransBrake active again. And let's think. Oh, there are some options here for the launch timer. It won't reset if the driver were to pedal the car. If they were to lift because they lost traction, if they lift from 99 to say 40% pedal, the timer may pause, but it won't reset back to 0. It won't reset the timer back to 0 unless they go below this number here, this reset below A cell pedal position. And I'll work through this a little slower again here. So my pedal, I'm going to go back down to 0 right at this is the end of the run. So now my launch timer should go back to 0. Right, we went below that, and then we got to hold our TransBrake. And now our launch ramp time is 0 because our brake is held. And when we give this 99% throttle, we're now in launch mode, which is using these override tables. And then when we keep the pedal held but release the TransBrake, what's going to happen here is this table is going to run from the left side of 0 seconds over to the right. It's going to go half second, 1 second, 1.5, 2, 2.5. And actually I'm going to slow these down so it's easier to watch. So I'm going to put these to 5 seconds, 4, 3, 2, 1, because I'm going to try to pause this if the driver lifts. But so in a normal situation, all the driver is going to do is hold the pedal, right, still at 99. They're going to release this TransBrake. This timer is going to start counting, and it's going to run through these values in the table. Right, you saw that multiplier launch time value change from half up to 1 as the time went up. So as the car is moving down the track, the VCU doesn't necessarily know distance, it knows time. And this is just a multiplier based on time after the TransBrake gets released. And if the driver pedals it, if they lift because they don't want to, if they have wheel slip or something like that, if they lift enough, that time will pause. If they get back in it, the time would resume counting up. But if they go all the way down to 0 or below this number here, that's when it's going to reset down to 0. I believe it also needs the brake to be on for it to reset to 0. Or maybe it's a certain amount of time to reset to 0, because I haven't changed the brake. So again, they'd hit the brake on, right? TransBrake on. There's a time here that the TransBrake has to be high before it will start running the timer. We'll go to 99%. We'll release the brake, start the timer, pedal it. Timer pauses because we went below 80. Paused at 5.3. Right, we need to go below 75, and there's 2 of these, so I should have gone lower. But anyway, so if the driver now presses the pedal again, then the timer starts back up. It resumes counting, doesn't restart. And hopefully that's enough tools that somebody can take a car and adjust those in order to make it go real quick down a drag race. You can basically ideally the driver doesn't have to mess with the pedal every single run, right? If you get these numbers figured out well, you can find some numbers where the car just kind of goes quickly and is repeatable, and then maybe make small changes, right? The driver might make small changes if the track surface changes a lot, but they won't be doing a lot of pedal work just to get the car, running consistently. We want a consistent pedal and a consistent run is one of the goals, I think. Anyway, I hope that helps. Thank you for watching.